example, we have the largest district being about 5.5 percentage points over the average, and the smallest district being about 7.4% under the average. So that's a difference of over 12 percentage points, and that jurisdiction then needs to try to equalize those differences by making adjustments to district boundaries. Now, there are some reasons, perhaps, when you could exceed the 10%, the 10-point rule, and that is to create a minority influence or majority district, or as an example, to underpopulate a high growth area of the county or city. Talking about dilution of minority voting strength, a couple of examples of that. Things to avoid: packing or cracking. Packing is an attempt to locate most of the minority population into one district so as to dilute influence in other districts. And cracking is splitting the minority population into two or more districts so as to dilute influence in all districts. And here's an example of that. In this particular example, we have 5 districts, and 2 of which are minority majority or minority influence districts. Under the packing example, most of the minority population has been located into one district. And under the cracking example, the minority population has been split amongst 4 districts. So these are things that a city or county or school board should seek to avoid doing in the redistricting process. We use census blocks. It's readily available. It's presumed to be correct. Information from the Bureau of the Census comes down in units that may be shaped like a block, but may not be shaped like a block. That's just the nomenclature of this unit, but it includes information on population, race, voting age, ethnicity, all the sort of information that you would need in the redistricting process. You can supplement this information with other sources of information, but that you need to be clear in your documentation as to why you are doing this and how you are doing this. Our experience has been that in exercises that occur immediately after the conclusion of a decennial census, there really is no other need to supplement the census data with other sources of information. We try to follow significant boundaries, and those could be major roadways, water bodies, things like that. It's easier to understand for voters. It's less disruptive to voting precincts. Significant boundaries are usually coterminous with census blocks, and so it makes sense to do this. There are other criteria. Districts must be contiguous to one another. You attempt to keep communities of interest together. In the case of the county, you would attempt to keep cities and neighborhoods from being split by district boundaries. And you try to avoid districts that have bizarre shapes. And we've all heard the term gerrymandering. This is named after a governor of Massachusetts many years ago who created a particular district. And someone commented that that looked like a salamander, and the other person said, no, that's a gerrymander. So that's where that term comes from, and you try to avoid these sorts of shapes. In more recent times, here's an example of a gerrymandered district in North Carolina, which I believe that followed I-85, and there was a case in front of the Supreme Court that ruled that particular shape invalid. Now, there are special criteria that are contained in the Pinellas County Charter. Most of these are similar to criteria that one would use in any other redistricting process, but it is specifically stated in the charter. No district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a party or an incumbent. Districts shall not be drawn with the intent or the result of denying or abridging the equal opportunity of racial or language minorities. Districts need to be contiguous and as nearly equal in population as is possible. And where feasible, we utilize municipal boundaries and we try to keep together the unincorporated areas of the county. So again, these are the criteria that we are using in this process. As I stated earlier, it's impossible to attain all of these criteria to the maximum extent possible. And so what we do is we balance these criteria against each other, with population being the dominant criteria. Let's talk briefly about the 2020 census. This country has been conducting a census for many, many years. The organizational tasks regarding the 2020 census actually began about a year and a half before Census Day, which is April 1st. And the census data is presumed to be correct. And this was the original plan for the census. It actually, counting began in January of 2020. Census Day is the day that we take a snapshot of America's households. That was April 1st. And then counts for reapportionment for Congress were to be given out by the end of 2020. And then the data for redistricting at the state and local level was to be delivered March 31st of this year. Here's what actually happened this past go around, and largely due to the COVID outbreak, things were delayed significantly. The census suspended field operations, actually suspended them altogether for a couple of months. The reapportionment counts due at the end of last year were not delivered until April of this year. And the redistricting data due at the end of March of this year was not delivered until mid-August of this year. And then a second set of data, the same numbers, but in a more user-friendly format, was delivered towards the end of September. The Pinellas Charter provides for a county districting board. This section was approved by the voters of Pinellas County in 2016. There are 11 members appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and the board is charged with developing one or more proposals to redistrict the county commission. The county commission is not bound by these recommendations. These are advisory in nature. Florida statutes limits the authority to redistrict a county to the county legislative body, which is the Board of County Commissioners. Nonetheless, a charter may provide for an advisory board, and that is what the voters of Pinellas County have approved. Moving forward, this meeting, there'll be a few other community input meetings where we're seeking input from the public on the current redistricting options being considered. There will be meetings of the redistricting board later in October, also in November, and then one or more recommendations from the redistricting board will be delivered to the Board of County Commissioners. for their initial consideration in November, and then final adoption will occur in early December of this year. Remember, we talked about criteria earlier in this presentation. In sort of an unusual situation, the current boundaries of the districts for both the at-large districts and the single-member districts are well within acceptable tolerances in terms of population deviation from the mean or average. For the at-large districts, the residence areas of the at-large districts, the spread between the smallest and the largest is less than 3 percentage points. And for the single member districts, the spread between the smallest and the largest district is a little bit larger, but not much. And so it's well within the 10 percentage point threshold that is commonly followed. So although the existing districts are within acceptable tolerances, there are a few different alternatives that the Redistricting Board has developed for consideration. It doesn't mean that the Redistricting Board will approve any of these, but they are being considered at the present time, and we can talk about those shortly. But if you would like more information on the process, you can go to this website on the Pinellas County website. What I'd like to do is jump over to some maps, and so let me go to some data first. For the at-large districts, we've just looked at the current data, and we found that it was very acceptable in terms of deviations. There are two alternatives being considered for the at-large residence areas, and both of those are also well within acceptable tolerances in terms of deviations from the average district size. For single member districts, there are currently 3 alternatives being considered, and all of these 3 are also well within acceptable tolerances in terms of deviations from the average district size. So what I would like to do finally is to show some of the maps that are currently being considered and show you how some of the differences are from plan to plan. This is a map of the current at-large residence areas for the at-large districts. Remember that Pinellas County is one of 2 counties that has 7 members of the Board of County Commissioners. 4 are elected from single member districts where only the voters of the district have the opportunity to vote for a candidate for the Board of County Commissioners. There's also 3 at-large districts. Each candidate for an at-large seat must reside in a particular residence district, but all of the voters in Pinellas County have the opportunity to vote for candidates for the at-large seats. And so each elector in Pinellas has the opportunity to vote for 4 out of 7 county commissioners. So these are the residence areas, and you'll notice that they run in a more or less in a north-south pattern. One alternative that is being considered by the Redistricting Board is to change that to an east-west pattern. So there would be resulting a North County residence area, a South County residence area, and then a mid-county resident area for persons seeking to serve on the Board of County Commissioners. Very different from the current plan, which remains shaded in the blue, red, and yellow shading. One alternative that has been considered by the Redistricting Board is sort of a compromise in between the east-west pattern of the first alternative and the existing north-south pattern, and that is to have the districts go more of a diagonal shape, where it's more a north-south or southwest-northeast pattern between the three residence areas for persons seeking to serve on the Board of County Commissioners. So those are the two alternatives for the at-large seats that are currently being considered. There are three alternatives for the single-member districts. These are the current districts for the single-member districts within Pinellas County government. They more or less have an east-west pattern here. The first alternative moves Clearwater Beach, which is actually part of the city of Clearwater, from District 4 into District 5. When you add that population of Clearwater Beach, which I recall it being 4,000 or 4,500 people, into this district, you would need to shed some population from this district into District 4. And the way that is done is to remove this upper part of District 5, which is in the countryside area, and move that from District 5 into District 4. The second alternative for single-member districts is similar to the first, but has another twist to it. It begins by moving Clearwater Beach into District 5, but then to continue this line and to make this boundary line more horizontal. This district, we take this part of District 4 and move it into District 5. So we've had Clearwater Beach and this area here going into District 5. And to offset that population change, a greater area of this part of District 5 is moved into District 4. And this road here, I believe, is Sunset Point. Yes, Sunset Point Road. This boundary line here. So it's an attempt to keep these more of a community of interest together and to have a boundary line that is more easily understood and more logical here. Both plans at the present time make no other changes to District 6, 7, or any other changes to Districts 4 or 5. So the third alternative currently being considered is to change the east-west pattern for most of the districts in Pinellas County, well, I should say for two of the districts, to a north-south pattern. And so instead of running this boundary line here between Districts 4 and 5, the boundary line would go north-south. And this then would split most of the unincorporated area in North County into two of the county commission districts. And so that's the effect of this particular plan. Again, as with the other two alternatives, there have been no changes made at least at the present time, to districts 6 or district 7. And so, Brian, that concludes the presentation on the alternatives being considered at the present time by the redistricting board.
Well, excellent. Now's the time to hear from you. So if you have any questions on the presentation or the maps, please type those into the Q&A feature in Zoom. We did have one question from a participant just asking if they can be seen, and the answer is no. The only folks that you do see are the panelists, which would be Kurt and myself. I see we do have one hand raised, so we'll go ahead and answer that. If you can unmute by pressing 6, you can go ahead and have 3 minutes for a public comment. We'd ask that you state your name for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, good morning. My name's John Stock, and what I wanted to comment about was, first of all, I like the existing at-large districts. What I wanted to talk about was the 4, they're referred to as single-member districts. And number one, I wish the alternative maps we've seen, I wish they had municipal boundaries of the cities and towns. That would be helpful. But the thing that I would really like to see is a maps that, or an alternative that has all the cities and towns in Pinellas County, they're whole, they're not divided. That's not possible with St. Petersburg, but I think Clearwater and Largo could all fit in District 5. Pinellas Park could all fit in District 6. And Seminole is actually the worst. I think that's ironic. If you ask people which city in Pinellas County was in 3 different districts and you said it began with an S, they'd probably say St. Petersburg, but it's actually Seminole. And that, I think Seminole could easily fit into District 6. That's what's the most important to me. I'd say I dislike that alternative 3 the most because it is practically the exact opposite of what I want. It cuts Largo and Clearwater in half. I think it's possible that Clearwater could all fit. That's what I'd like, is if we could have an alternative that and also the unincorporated communities, East Lake, Palm Harbor, I don't think that should be an issue, that they're kept whole as well. They're sometimes treated almost like stepchildren or orphans. So that's what I wanted to ask for. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And Kurt, it looks like we have another question asking, what are the optimum numbers for at-large and single-member districts? Are you able to provide an answer to that question?
Sure. And on the first question about not splitting cities, you're right. It's impossible to not split the city of St. Petersburg. In theory, it would be possible to not split the city of Clearwater, but that would require a rather significant adjustment to boundaries. And when you begin doing major things like that, you inevitably, it's like pushing in the side of a balloon. You have to make changes other places, and I don't know if we wouldn't end up splitting another city, some other city somewhere. But in terms of splitting cities, generally speaking, the redistricting board did look at that. And, there are 24 cities in Pinellas County. The overwhelming majority of them are not split at all. The ones that are split, I would say, significantly by the current single member district boundaries are Clearwater and St. Pete. There's a few others that are split, but in my opinion, they're rather minor splits. They're not significant splits, but it is something that we could, re-examine the next time the board meets.
Thanks,
With
Kurt.
regard to the question about ideal populations, let me share my screen here. For the at-large residence areas, the target population is 319,702 people. That's the target for the at-large seats. And for the single member seats, a little bit less, 239,777 people is the target.
Well, thank you very much, Kurt. I'm not seeing any other questions right now in the Q&A feature. But as a reminder, if you would like to just provide a comment on your thoughts and feelings on the presentation, the redistricting process, or the proposed alternative maps, please just go ahead and raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 on your mobile device. All right, I do see one. If you have your hand up, if you would hit *6 to unmute, please state your name and go ahead and provide your comments.
Is that okay? Here's my comment. I disagree with the previous speaker and a lot of your mechanizations about keeping cities together and all kinds of things like that. From what was said earlier, population is supposed to be the dominant factor in drawing these lines. So I would think that you would take, let's say for the at-large seats, that you would start at the northern end of the county and just keep adding census data until you reach that absolute number of 319,702, and just keep going down until you divided the county into 3 equal sections as nearly as possible and have no regard for cities or counties, or cities or any kind of other subdivision like that. And you can do the same thing with the single member districts, starting east and west, and just start and just move the line until you reach that maximum number of 239,717, because it appears to me what your committee is doing is trying to, figure out how they can manipulate these lines to favor a particular segment of the population or a particular political party or something like that. That's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that comment. All right, I am not seeing any other hands raised or any questions in the Q&A feature, so I'll give you one more opportunity to do that. And as I'm looking, waiting for hands or questions, I'll remind you that tomorrow, October 21st at 6 p.m. is our 4th and final community meeting. So if you do think of any questions or comments, or you'd like to see the presentation again, you can join through the Zoom app tomorrow and participate as well. Also, as a reminder, the maps that we're going over this morning, you can access those on Pinellas County's redistricting website. That's on pinellascounty.org on the redistricting tab. So I don't see any other hands raised or questions to be asked. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this morning's meeting. We really appreciate you attending. We're glad that we're able to hear from you. And we'd like to wish you a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you.